Here's a fact for you. The quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. Just think about it. How much time do you spend thinking about, worrying about, wondering about relationships? A lot. They're the things that'll often wake you up in the middle of the night and not let you get back to sleep. They're the things that'll distract you from work. They're the things that'll take you out of the game because you're trying to figure out what's going on in the relationship. So when they're not going well, they have a really big impact. And when they go well, they kind of make life a whole lot better, don't they? So with that in mind, we're going to dig into today's topic, attachment styles. Hi, my name is Heather, and I am a relationship and empowerment coach, and I love working with people to help them distinguish blind spots that are getting in the way of them having the life and love that they truly desire. And in service of that, today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the 4 different attachment styles, talking about how they develop and what they actually look like in adults. So join me, won't you? As a quick reminder, attachment styles really influence how we connect and bond with other people. I've said it as the way that we will give and receive love. And so if you think about it from that perspective, attachment styles have a huge impact on how well we build relationships, maintain relationships, and the longevity of them. So learning about attachment styles can be really worth your while. Attachment styles start to develop from the very beginning of our lives based on how our caregivers or parents will respond to our needs or our cues for connection. When those needs are met about 30% of the time or more, we will develop what's called a secure attachment style, which is really great for relationships. When they're met less consistently than that, when our parents are or our caregivers are inconsistent or ignore us, or sometimes even threatening or scary, we will develop what is called an insecure attachment style, of which there are 3. And those have a really significant impact on how we will interact with other people in our lives. So today, we're going to dig into that. Attachment styles can be a little bit confusing sometimes, especially if you're new to the conversation. So to help you keep it all straight, there's a few things that the 4 attachment styles, we have secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment. They view a few different things in different ways. So they view intimacy and togetherness differently. They view how they deal with conflict differently. They view sex differently and the connection inside of sex differently. Their ability to communicate their needs and their wishes, they also will do that very differently. And their expectations of their partner and the relationship of it, like as a whole, they'll also have a very different view of that. First, we're going to talk about each of the different attachment styles and how they develop in childhood. This is all related to how you experienced your earliest days with your parents or your primary caregivers. And so let's start with secure attachment. Secure attachment style, and quite honestly the one that we'd all prefer to be, develops when children have parents or primary caregivers who are very attuned to them and their needs, to the child and their needs. They provide love and affection when the child asks for it. They will respond to the child's needs, like for feeding, or they're tired, or they're scared. They get physical contact when the child wants physical contact, and they develop confidence that their parent will be there for them when they need them, that they're loved and supported, and that they're safe in the world. This makes it safe for the child to explore the world and have their parents as a home base. It allows them to expand their horizons, expand their comfort zone, and feel safe while they're doing so, which is a really great and important foundation for building relationships with themselves and the world. Next on the list is anxious attachment style, and this one is also called ambivalent or preoccupied, and it develops in children when parents are inconsistent in the way that they respond to their children's needs. This creates for the child a sense of concern or worry about whether or not they're going to get their needs met when they need them to, a lack of confidence in that relationship and the support that they have from their parents. It will have them start to pay a lot of attention to where their parents are and what their parents are doing so they can kind of keep track of them and make sure that they're going to be available when they need to get their needs met. And children may also learn that in order to get their needs met, that they had to cry, become loud, or really act out in order to get the attention of their parents. And when they did go exploring, if they did go exploring in the world, they would be constantly checking back for where their parents were, looking for them, making sure that they were still there and that the child was still safe. So you can see how this would be kind of create a level of anxiousness for the child in how they related to the world and relationships. The third attachment style we'll talk about is avoidant attachment style. This one's also called dismissive, and it comes from or is developed when caregivers or parents were often tuned out, absent, or neglectful when dealing with their children. They may also have been rigid or distant in the way that they responded to their children's needs. That may have been, you're going to eat or sleep on my schedule, as opposed to I'm going to respond to what your needs were. Often children were left to their own devices much of the time or too much of the time, and that meant that their cues for connection were either unmet or ignored. And that can be really hard for the child. They learn that in order to get their needs met, they have to kind of do it by themselves, and they also learn how to self-regulate on their own as opposed to being able to connect with their parents and be soothed by the connection with their parents when they're upset about something. Even though they may have not been demonstrative in the need for connection after a while, because they start to become a little shut down and they do their own self-regulating, they're still very conscious of what's going on in the world around them, very aware of where their parents are and what's happening with them. They just don't display it on the outside as much, but inside they're just as dysregulated as anxious attachment style kids. The final attachment style is disorganized attachment. This one is also called disoriented or unresolved trauma, and it really comes from a traumatizing background. This is often seen in people who are physically, verbally, or sexually abused or witnessed that kind of abuse or have experienced other types of childhood trauma. What they learn is that rather being a source of safety, their parents or caregivers are actually a source of threat or fear, which would be very unsettling. And because of this and the unpredictability of their parents, it became frightening. And the child will then develop disjointed responses in learning how to get their needs met. Sometimes they may act in the avoidant way of being withdrawn and shut down on the outside, but dysregulated on the inside, or they may act out like the anxious attachment style and become loud or vocal. So it can kind of swing back and forth between both. Next, we want to talk about what these different attachment styles will look like in adults. That makes it a little bit easier to identify for yourself and be able to understand maybe how you're interacting with other people or why you're interacting with other people the way you are. We're going to start with secure because, again, that's the place where we'd all prefer to be. Relationships, when you have a secure attachment style, tend to be a lot easier. It's easier to connect with partners, with friends, with coworkers. You're comfortable asking for and giving help when it's needed. You can self-regulate as well. So if you get upset, you can calm yourself down. And you can also do that when you're with a partner. That's not always easy for people with the other attachment styles to do, for sure. If you sit with a secure attachment style, you tend to be protective of the relationship and yourself and others, as opposed to like running away from the relationship or separating yourself from the relationship or getting reactive with the relationship. There's a level of confidence that you have in your ability to create relationships and maintain them and have them last for a long period of time. So the idea that you have to worry about them disappearing or going away or that you're going to be alone often is not part of the internal dialogue that you have when you have a secure attachment style. Also, secure attachment style folks tend to be very comfortable giving and receiving love from other people, which is definitely not the status quo for the other attachment styles. And because of this, you have an easier time dealing with conflict. You're less inclined to take things personally. You're more able to listen to what the other person is saying, as well as express your own needs in the moment. There's a tendency to not need to blame or shame your partner because there's a level of trust that exists between you, and like we're working towards solving the problem. It's us against the problem instead of you against me, which can often show up inside of the other attachment styles for sure. Generally speaking, say the secure attachment style has a belief or a sense that the world is generally safe and people are trustworthy, which makes building relationships with people a whole lot easier. Next on the list with what an attachment style looks like as adults, we're going to look at the anxious attachment style. This is a style that can be labeled clingy or needy, and they can have a difficult time making a true connection or feeling truly connected with other people, which can make it really challenging to form long-term balanced relationships. They tend to hyper-focus on the relationship and their partner instead of paying attention and being focused on themselves. This can make them seem demanding or needy, and they may communicate through complaints, and they tend to focus on what's missing in the relationship. Anxiously attached folks tend to have a difficulty with self-esteem as well. They'll often be looking to other people to recognize their value or help validate them, give them approval, and they tend to feel very dependent on others to meet their needs and to have them feel safe. As well, self-regulation, so being able to self-soothe when they're upset, can be really challenging for them. They will often default to a fight response where they'll act out, becoming loud and extreme to draw attention. They may use strategies to elicit a response like blaming, shaming, name calling, that kind of thing. Alternatively, they can also do the fawn response, which is very focused on the other and can sometimes be confused with people pleasing. It often looks very similar to that. A lot of how can I fix it? How can I make it better for you if they're afraid that they're going to be losing the relationship. Anxiously attached folks are driven by a fear of abandonment, and sometimes they'll end relationships too soon because they're afraid that it's going to end anyway. They would eventually be left, and so they'd leave before they get left, kind of thing. On the other end of the spectrum, they can hold on to relationships longer than they should because they're afraid of being alone. So this anxious attachment style, although there is a level of comfort with intimacy and connection, in fact maybe a craving for intimacy and connection, it doesn't necessarily mean that that need gets met, which can make it feel really lonely. For third on the list for what it looks like as an adult with an attachment style, we're looking at the avoidant attachment style, or what's also labeled dismissive. This is the one that looks like cool and aloof. It can be the one people joke about with commitment issues, and they're often overly independent, which can make it challenging to build connection and form relationships with any intimacy in them. People with avoidant attachment styles tend to isolate and feel more relaxed alone, and they are uncomfortable and view feelings of vulnerability as weakness. So being in connection with other people or being around other people and their feelings can feel really stressful for them, which is why they'll tend to withdraw more often than lean into relationships. They find it difficult to move towards intimate connections, and also really difficult to even talk about emotion. They would prefer to rationalize and think their way through things than to feel their way through things. They find it difficult to ask for help. Admitting that they have needs feels really risky, so asking for help from others is really uncomfortable. They also find it really challenging to trust. You can get that when you didn't have your needs met as a child, and that's what you learned, was that you wouldn't get your needs met. It would be really hard to trust that other people were going to be there for you or meet them for you. So they really do struggle to trust people. Co-regulation is often challenging with the avoidant attachment style. That means being able to be with their partner and calm themselves down while they're with their partner or with another person. They're really good usually at removing themselves and self-soothing while they're on their own. That tends to be the thing that will calm them down and relieve stress. They will default into the flight tendency where they'll physically or emotionally leave or check out. As well, they can do a full shutdown and dissociation by the freeze response, where they might compartmentalize what's happening to themselves. They really tend to focus on appearing self-sufficient and avoid expressing their needs for anything or expressing their feelings in any way. It's just not comfortable for them. They tend to be driven by a sense of shame and a fear of being seen as a failure, so they can be overly critical and defensive in relationships, both of themselves and the other person. Finally, we have the disorganized attachment style and what it looks like in an adult. This is the one that people can be labeled as crazy or volatile because they lack consistency in their behaviors inside relationships. They can sometimes be called borderline or bipolar, like, oh, they're bipolar, which is very different. Those disorders are very different and shouldn't be lumped in here jokingly or otherwise. Joking about those sorts of things actually diminishes the realities of each of those experiences for the people who are borderline, for the people who are bipolar, and for the people who are disorganized attachment style. Their experiences are real, and the people who have to deal with them day to day deserve that kind of respect. So let's refrain from using those types of labels. Disorganized attachment style folks feel torn between wanting love and being afraid of it. It's very chaotic. It's very challenging inside. It's a real push-pull come here, go away. One minute they need you, they want you, they can't live without you, and the next they are really uncomfortable with you being there and need to get away from you. And often that can flip in a moment. They will flip back and forth between the ambivalent and avoidant behaviors, and that can be really confusing for the people on the other side. Being connected with people is scary. Being on their own is scary and uncomfortable. So they really struggle to maintain close connections with people because of this chaotic experience, this come here, go away experience, and the confusion that can create in relationships. They can trigger easily into overwhelm, which may cause them either to retreat or react in a volatile way, which again can be really uncomfortable for them as well as the people that they're in relationship with. And as a last resort, they'll often check out or dissociate from any situation that they find uncomfortable or that could potentially cause them pain. So being connected in relationships and staying the course in relationships can be really challenging for these people with this disorganized attachment style. By this point, you're probably wondering, what can I do about these things? Can I do anything about these things? They seem so ingrained. They started at such a young age. Is there anything that we can actually do about attachment styles? Well, the answer is yes. Attachment styles are adaptable. There are ways that you can start healing some things and moving yourself closer towards the secure attachment style with some intentionality and often some support from an outside source, someone who can see things that you can't, or someone who is really trained in dealing with attachment styles. In doing the healing work, you're going to be going against the things that have been ingrained in your nervous system since you were a little kid. Like, they are instinctive reactions. And so rewiring that or reprogramming that can be really challenging to do by yourself. But there are some things. First, let's talk about what we can do with it. Anxious attachment style. First off, they really need reassurance to build trust and learn that it's okay to receive the love that is there for them, that you love them, that it's safe for them to trust that you love them. And that can take time for them to develop that awareness, understanding, and belief. They need to practice shifting their stress response from that fight or fawn back towards the neutral and secure attachment style, trusting that they can trust the people around them, that the people that they have chosen to be in relationships with are safe and love them. One of the good things about this particular attachment style, because they're often so attuned to what's happening for other people, they're very emotionally aware. They often will have a high level of compassion and empathy for what's happening for other people, which can kind of be to their detriment when they're stuck in the middle of the attachment style. That's part of why they can give people too many chances. The good thing about that is that they would be able to then practice turning that compassion and empathy towards themselves and learn that, what's going on for them is real, it is ingrained, and have some grace with themselves while they're learning how to better connect with others. That'll make a huge difference for them. In regards to avoidant attachment style and what they can do to help move themselves closer to the secure attachment style, they get to reestablish for themselves that it's safe to be intimate, that emotions are safe, that their feelings are safe, that that's not a sign of vulnerability or weakness. And that can be really stressful for them. Again, their nervous system is programmed to respond to emotions are dangerous. So emotions are uncomfortable, emotions are scary. So they need to reprogram, learn how to regulate their nervous system when they start experiencing the stress response, to calm themselves down, to soothe themselves, be able to connect with the other person, stay in the conversation while they're dealing with the emotion that might be there. That's the good stuff and the bad stuff. The desire for connection from another person can still be considered a problem for the emotional or for the avoidant attachment style. So learning that that's okay, that that's safe, that they have a right to express their needs, that their needs will be met, which include, I need some space right now, that's okay. That's a really big part of recovery or healing for the avoidant attachment style. Finally, we have the disorganized attachment style and what they can do to help themselves move closer towards the secure attachment style. Because this one is often rooted in more severe trauma than the others, this one can be really served well by working with a very well-trained therapist or experienced practitioner in dealing with attachment styles. In order to begin to heal, they have to learn that it's safe to trust connections. And in order to do that, they usually need to learn how to trust themselves first. That work can be really challenging to do on their own. So finding somebody that they trust and that they can rely on can help them learn how to regulate their nervous system and reprogram that instinctive reaction to connection with other people. A couple of things to remember before I go. It's really helpful to remind yourself that when people are dealing with any of the insecure attachment styles, it's coming from a place of they didn't grow up in a supportive environment. They didn't have a lot of validation, and they really didn't have consistency in getting their needs met when they were kids. They're kind of hurt little kids, really. So having space and grace and compassion for them is really helpful when you're working with them or with yourself and trying to recover from this. Also, beware of attachment style stereotyping. It's so seductive to do. It's so easy to do. You want to, once you learn about them, you want to start looking at all the people in your life and start labeling them with what you think they are. And I highly recommend avoiding doing this. If someone is interested in learning about it, if you share with them that you're learning about this and they're interested in learning about it, then absolutely, by all means, go ahead and dig into this. But to stand on one side and speculate about what someone on the other side is may not work out in your best interest or theirs or the best interest of the relationship. So having direct conversations is often easier and a better way to go with this type of thing. That about covers it for this deep dive into attachment styles and how they showed up and what they look like for adults who have them. Next time, we're going to be talking about attachment styles and how they work together between the different attachment styles. So how anxious and avoidant work together, how disorganized fits into the mix, and talking about some strategies to be able to solve some of those problems. Until then, again, below in the description box, we'll have linked the attachment styles quiz from dianepoolheller.com. She has a really great attachment styles quiz that's free, and the explanations that she gives for each of the attachment styles is really, really helpful. She also has some really great and reliable information on her website, so highly recommend checking her out as a resource. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found value in the content today. Please like and subscribe, as that helps to get the word out to other people and also keeps you up to date on any future videos that'll be coming out. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love to hear from my watchers. You can also drop a comment below and I'll be the one who absolutely replies to you. If you'd like to talk more about how you can improve any of your relationships or any of the stuff that you've got going on in your relationships, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can have a free sample session call to talk about what you might be able to do, some simple changes you might be able to make in your relationships to help you deal with attachment styles that are impacting your happiness and relationships. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.